In this demo, we're going to show you how to create a demilitarized zone, or a DMZ, on our Cisco Small Business Security Appliance. The first thing we need to do is log into the configuration utility. We'll use our new username that we created with our more secure password. And if you'll notice, it pops up a note asking us if Internet Explorer should remember this password. If you're trying to be secure on your network, the one thing you want to do is always make sure that Internet Explorer does not save your passwords. Otherwise, it's easy for somebody to get your passwords, or if they're on your machine, to just simply go to this configuration website and change the configuration of your utility. So when we log into the utility, we typically have the Getting Started page. We'll choose the Advanced option, which tells us a little bit about how to create a DMZ. You'll notice it says the DMZ port. One of the first things we need to do is set the optional port to DMZ. We'll configure some DMZ settings and then configure any needed reserved IP addresses if we need to do those, and then we'll save configuring firewall and NAT rules for another demo. So we'll go ahead and select the Set Optional Port to DMZ mode, which will take us directly to the Networking Optional Port page. And on this page, you'll see that we can set the status of the optional port on our security appliance. This particular security appliance has an optional port, and that optional port can either be a WAN port, an extra WAN port for redundancy. It can be isolated through the firewall as a DMZ and create that DMZ zone for you. Or it can be another LAN port if you need an additional LAN port inside the network. For our purposes, we're going to create a DMZ, and in the demo, we've already taken the DMZ port and plugged it into the DMZ side of things. So we'll go ahead and tell it that we want that optional port to be a DMZ port, and then we'll click Apply. Okay, now that our optional port is in DMZ mode, and also what you'll see on the front of the security appliance is there's even a little DMZ light that lets you know that you're in DMZ mode. So the next thing that we want to do is make some configuration settings. We want to configure some settings for the DMZ. So now that we're in DMZ mode, the DMZ port setup is available to us. The default address for the DMZ zone is the internal IP address 172.16, starting with the range of 2. And that's a good address for what we want to do. In our case, the IP address for the DMZ port is .1, and then for the computers that are going to be connected to the DMZ, we'll go ahead and set that up for DHCP mode so that the security appliance will hand out addresses to the workstations and the servers that happen to be on the DMZ. In our case, it'll be servers, a web server or two, and it recommends an IP address for starting range and an IP address for an ending range. And one of the things that if you're going to be handing out IP addresses to the machines on the network, it's important that you have a primary server DNS number too. In the case of our simulations, that's 198.28.56.108. And that's the primary DNS server of the ISP, and so that allows the machines to get out and find their DNS information and be able to find their way out to the internet. That's an important piece to add to the default information that you're given to make sure that the machines can communicate appropriately. So there's other options for secondary DNS server and TFTP servers and such. We aren't going to worry about those. The lease time, 24 hours, is reasonable for now. So let's go ahead and click Apply, and that will set up the DMZ port for an IP address and to be able to hand out addresses to the rest of the machines that are on the network. One of the other things that's important when you're using a DHCP server such as this, and you're handing out a range of IP addresses, if you have a server, you probably want to reserve an address so that you have a specific machine getting a specific address. And the way that's done is you can add a DHCP reservation for the DMZ port. So it's called DMZ reserved IPs, but it's a DHCP reservation for that port. So we're going to go ahead and enter in 172.16.2. We'll choose the first one in the range, 100, and we'll give it a MAC address of AA, BB, CC. Notice the colons in between, and 11. As you can see, that's a totally made-up MAC address, but that gives us the opportunity to show you how the MAC address will apply. And so the machine with that MAC address, as it connects to the DHCP server, will always get 172.16.2.100. And as the machines begin to connect to our DMZ, we'll see a list of the machines that have connected and the IP addresses that they've received. So it's fairly simple, as you can see, on our security appliance to configure a DMZ because it's set up to do that. It has an optional port that we put in DMZ mode. We configure the settings, the IP address, and the DHCP settings for the optional port when it's in DMZ mode. And then if we need to, we can configure reserved IP addresses for the machines on that network. And as those machines connect and receive IP addresses,